Hello, and welcome to Dardingli's Interviews, a space created by professionals for professionals of the real estate industry. Interviews will be available on Spotify and YouTube on the 1st and 15th of every month. Tune in to stay updated with the latest in real estate trends.
Welcome to Dardingli's Interviews. Today we have with us Steve Stivala, Associate Director of KPMG for Economic and Regulation. Good morning, Mr. Steve.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me on your interview series.
Thank you for being with us. For those who doesn't know, Mr. Steve is a graduate with honors in the University of Malta in economics, and he has a master in economics and competition of law in the King College of London and in the University College of London. Steve's main area of expertise is economics and regulation. During his time at KPMG, he worked on several high-profile projects involving industry, market and analysis, cost-benefits analysis for the EU fund applications, and the socio-economic impact and assessment required by governments, local and international, for various public decisions, evaluation of the EU funds and national programs, and other economic relation work. So, Mr. Steve Binoff, one of the main directors here in Malta for KPMG, you had relation with the real estate industry on this island. So what relationship does KPMG has with the real estate market here in Malta?
Very interesting question, Jorge. So I think every individual has, a relationship with real estate, whether it's a couple as a, first-time buyer, a shop owner, an investor, a tenant, or a landlord. So real estate affects us in different ways, and that's why it's a topic which interests many. As a firm, as KPMG, we have a special, unique relationship with real estate. We collect numerous data points on property market, and we've been collecting such data since 2014. And this includes data on prices, obviously, but also on qualitative characteristics, size, locality, views, number of bedrooms, and so on. And using this data and many other data points that we have access to, we've been producing an annual report on the construction industry and property market since 2017. And we are now on the 5th year, and the 2021 report is currently being compiled.
So having that information that currently you're working with in KPMG, how would you define in a few words the real estate industry in Malta?
We've been following the real estate market well before the publication of these reports, but I guess what these reports give us is like a comprehensive view of the market. And it's interesting to hear from industry players, collect data from different sources, and try to come up with an overall picture. I would describe the real estate industry in Malta using 3 words, actually: resilient, investment opportunity, and heterogeneous. So let me explain just briefly these 3 points. So resilient because it can withstand shocks. So even looking at the current pandemic and even the 2009 financial crisis, in times when economic growth was slowing down, property prices have not adjusted downwards as much as other property markets around the world. So in fact, if you were to trace average property prices throughout the recent past in Malta, you will notice periods of incline, followed by periods of a plateau, and then an incline again, with very small dips in prices in certain sub-segments of the market. And I put this down to the trust the Maltese people put in physical property as an investment opportunity. And this brings me to the second point. So investment opportunity, property in Malta is seen as a good investment, whether to rent out or to keep for your own use and benefit from capital appreciation. So this must be seen within the context of resilience of the property market So the fear of a property price crash is minimal. Some even say it's very difficult to have a property price crash in Malta owing to the small size of the market. This is the liquidity enjoyed by the Maltese people. It's another factor. And the low return from alternative investments given the low interest rate environment. There's also the behavioral and social aspect. So many Maltese prefer to own their homes, rather than rent. So in fact, around, if I'm not mistaken, 80% of Maltese are homeowners. And the last point, the third point, is heterogeneous, meaning different, right? So when we speak of the property market, I think it may make more sense to speak of property markets in the plural. So for instance, the property market of apartments in the 150K to 50K bracket behaves very differently than the market for, I don't know, penthouses in certain regions, or apartments in special designated areas or villas. So each market behaves differently and has different demand and supply characteristics.
So you speak about different trends, even now today with the pandemic, that sometimes we think the pandemic has been a problem for the market in general. So following what you just said, what role do you think the real estate market will have now in 2021 that we'll start this year already like used to this situation, used to this pandemic, and maybe even finding opportunities on it?
Yeah.
What role do you think the real estate sectors will play this new year?
It's difficult to say because things are changing very rapidly. Even government measures are changing in response to the ongoing pandemic. So we need different reactions to this reality. 2021 is going to be an interesting year, I think. So first of all, it remains to be seen what effect the pandemic is going to have on the property market. We've already seen some slowing down in 2020, and published pricing house indices have started to show some slight decreases during the first quarter of 2021. So we'll have to see the full effect once the dust settles. Though I must say government measures have surely helped to prop up the market. One has to keep in mind as well that the property market has been slowing down in price growth in the last couple of years after the explosive growth. So both in prices and in economic growth. So any movements in 2021 have to be seen in this light. Of course, 2020 and to a certain extent even 2021, as a continuation of the same trends, have seen drastic changes in tourist arrivals and household income. And these are two key drivers of property market demand. From the supply side, remember supply in the property market acts with a lag. So we're seeing a large number of permits for units being approved. And I expect these to slow down in the coming years, in 2021 and beyond, as new projects are put on the back burner until things return to normal.
Let's hope they return to normal, because the real estate sector in Malta is an important part of the economic, but which is the real relevance of the construction industry here in Malta?
Very interesting question. So that depends really on how you define the construction sector. So if one takes the official definition, all right, provided by the Statistics Office, that is construction of buildings as per the NAIS code definition, then the construction industry contributes around 2% of gross value added of the GDP, basically. However, let's keep in mind that construction industry is wider than that. There is, for instance, quarrying. There is civil engineering, architectural services, real estate services. All along the supply chain, from the quarrying of stone to finishing a residential home or an office. And these are not captured as part of construction. These are captured as part of other areas, other segments. However, if we were to take these into account, it takes you to around 10% of gross value added, which is quite substantial.
Mm-hmm.
And to add to that as well, here we're not considering services to construction industry players, like, for example, audit services to construction companies. So when you take these, let's call them indirect effects, one can easily take you to around 13% of gross value added.
That's an extremely large number.
It is. And it's a similar story for employment as well. Again, it depends on how you define the industry. But if you take all of these segments that I mentioned, I only have 2019 figures, but it's around 21,000 full-time equivalent, working in construction, real estate, quarrying, etc. So it's quite substantial.
Very substantial. And we actually can understand how much the real estate does influence the rest of the economy. But in the other hand, which will be the most influencing industries for the real estate market? What's influenced the most how the real estate market works here in Malta?
Yep. To answer that question, you need to look at what the economists call supply and use tables. So these are large tables constructed by the Statistics Office, and they show you the interplay between various industries. So let's take the construction industry. Which industries service the construction industry? And then in turn, the construction industry provides services to different other industries. So it's like a large matrix. And from there, you can see which are the industries which influence most the construction industry. However, a drawback to this is that one of the, let's say, largest industries, which is tourism, exists or lives in various industries. So we don't have a particular subsegment which is called tourism. Okay, so from these use tables, we cannot really discern the impact of tourism, though obviously tourism plays a very important part in the construction and real estate, and it's a great influence to the housing market, particularly with the popularity of private accommodation. I think it reached almost the level of collective accommodation, if I'm not mistaken. But it was a while back when I checked the statistics. And I would say also industries such as iGaming and financial services, which are substantial in size. And of course, these industries demand, office space, and you're pushing up prices of property that way. Mm-hmm. And they recruit a lot of expats, which in turn obviously need a roof over their heads. Apart from these three, I would also say that lending institutions also influence the housing market. Okay, in the sense that they make it easy or less easy to obtain finance, either for the purchase of property or for the development of property.
Yeah, so you spoke about two industries that are extremely important here in Malta, both tourism and iGaming, both relying on an expanding real estate market. So that is real estate market, you also said, that has increased prices due to that. In that regard, changing from the macroeconomic to the day-to-day issues that the population here in Malta face, what is the trend in house affordability? What has been the trend during these last years and current and during this pandemic?
Yes, affordability has always been an issue. The trend has been that of deteriorating housing affordability. In our report, we produce an index. It's a housing affordability index. And it takes into account multiple parameters, and it gives an indication of whether an individual or a couple with a median income can afford a property with a median price. Of course, the two most important parameters here are household income, obviously, and property prices. And income has been increasing at a slower rate than property prices, and this obviously presents a challenge. Affordability also must be seen not just with respect to people at the margin. So not just with respect to people who just cannot afford to own their own property, but it must be seen at all levels. So even a couple earning a decent salary nowadays, they have to make compromises, whether it is in locality or in size, okay, for example, compared to 5 years ago. So affordability is affecting everyone, not just people, as I said, at the margin. Of course, this also creates problems for low-income earners. That is evident, and we show in our report that a single individual on median wage, or even a couple, both with the minimum wage, for example, would find it very hard to find a decent property. In fact, less than 1% of our listings, of our data points, fulfill this price criteria, right? And this is where I believe housing authority schemes and social housing come in.
Can help. So do you think this trend of house affordability, these changes, has also changed the type of property people is acquiring and the type of property that construction firms are building?
Definitely. From what we've seen, this is not backed by statistics, but anecdotal evidence. But we've been hearing of individuals or couples who traditionally they would opt for properties in the center of the island, and they are now seeking properties elsewhere, which are more affordable. And actually, this can be seen through statistics, because if you analyze the price differences by locality, you will find that areas which are, let's say, less popular. Okay, so the most popular areas are obviously central and around the Grand Harbour region. But areas which are less popular are going up in price at a faster rate than the central area. And this is because people are, not flocking to these areas, but considering them as alternatives, and that increases demand. Mm-hmm. In terms of property size, I would say that properties are getting smaller. So definitely, developers are catering for smaller homes, more affordable homes, where they can find, where demand would be attributable or directed towards those types of properties.
Mm-hmm. So you said there's a change in the way of not only which kind of property people buy, but also where they buy it.
Exactly.
Has this also affected the second house investment? That has it changed recently?
I don't have any data on second property investment, so let's start with that. But what I can tell you from conversations that I have is that second property, third property, even fourth property acquisition is popular among the Maltese. However, as you know, from July this year, there's a regulation which is coming in, is the Central Bank of Malta Directive 16 regulation on loan to value, and it will become even harder to acquire a second property. So I think this will have an effect on the type and the locality of second time homeowners.
But even with the new regulations, people keep investing in Malta. So speaking about regulations, the Maltese economy in general, what are the fiscal advantages that make people want to invest in Malta?
If we focus on fiscal incentives or advantages for the housing industry, so the most obvious which comes to mind is, of course, the first-time buyer scheme. This has been offered, by the government of Malta for many years, and it was recently renewed. And as you know, under the scheme, buyers purchasing their first property do not have to pay stamp duty on the first 100,000. There were also a series of COVID measures as well last year, so reducing the income tax on the transfer of a movable property from 8% to 5%, and the reduction of the stamp duty from 5% to 1.5%, in both cases on the first 400,000 on contracts published by the end of March 2021. So all of these obviously help in increasing demand. Another government measure, this time targeted more towards property affordability, rather than the demand side issues, what was the scheme launched by the Housing Authority to help potential buyers which are having difficulties in entering the property market due to the 10% required deposit. So that was another scheme which I think helped in terms of demand.
So you spoke about changes in the regulations. What has been the main changes of the regulation in Malta regarding real estate and construction, and what do you think will be in the future? How do you think this will change in the future?
So in terms of regulations, I think many regulations have shaped the market throughout the years, right? So regulations, if I were to categorize, they can be regulations which affect the demand, those which affect the supply, and regulations which affect the operational aspect of the industry. So for instance, I mentioned the CBM Directive 16 that was targeted towards quelling demand to a certain extent when the property market was overheating. And I think that was the reason why certain measures got postponed to 2021. You had the rental reform, so the need to register rental contracts and the cap of the rent growth, and that is affecting demand, both demand and supply for rented properties. You had, as I mentioned, the first-time buyer scheme that is targeting demand. On the supply side, you had regulations, if I'm not mistaken, back in 2016 on height limitations, and that allowed the creation of more stories, and that obviously affects supply. What are the other regulations? Perhaps the regulation of real estate agents, which was quite recent, leading to more trust and more professionalism. Trend for the future, I mean, no one has a crystal ball, right? But we can only speculate. So I think we are moving towards more regulation directed towards responsible planning, and towards ensuring, health and safety procedures are adhered to.
This has been a very interesting interview, and we have covered a lot of topics regarding the real estate markets. Just to wrap it up and to finish this wonderful interview, I just wanted to end it up with some strengths and vulnerabilities that you might find in the real estate industry here in Malta. Both strengths and vulnerabilities that could be fixed.
So in terms of strengths, I think I already spoke about the resilience of the property market, and how it is a good return for investment. It has been, and it is still a good return for investment. And it is, one of the pillars of the Maltese economy, contributing to substantial value added and creating jobs for thousands of people. In terms of weaknesses, I can pin them down to three. The main three, in my opinion. The first one is sustainability. So there is limited inclusion of environmentally friendly measures in construction, and the lack of willingness to pay by the market, since property buyers, let's face it, tend to prioritize other characteristics. And given the importance of protecting the environment and the apparent failure of the market to address this issue on a large scale, I think we need more concrete measures to encourage or mandate that future construction in Malta to adhere to stricter standards in terms of efficiency and environmental friendliness. I think the second weakness is planning and aesthetics. And I think we are failing in this respect. So there needs to be more urban planning from a macro perspective rather than approving on a unit by unit basis. And the third one is a factor which has plagued the industry. So it's health and safety. It's another concern. We have seen a number of accidents in the recent past, and this needs to be rectified either through stricter and tighter enforcement or through system-wide changes which can ensure that all health and safety procedures are being followed.
So, Mr. Steve Stivala, has been a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you. And I hope we can count with you in the future for future interviews for Dardingli. And thank you very much for being with us. Goodbye.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Are you enjoying Dardingli's interviews? If you have any suggestions, questions or requests, you can contact us through our social media or at dardingli.com. Dardingli, the biggest Maltese property platform for owners and agencies. See you at the next programme. Hello, and welcome to Dardingli's interviews.